This doesn't light your fireman, the pilot lights out.
This football team is coming into our place. We're standing in our way.
This is a game of the heart. Focus and finish.
One game to go tonight, but it's been an interesting week 5 so far. I'm going to start off today with what I think is a huge story, and I've been harping on this since the preseason, but it's not receiving enough fantasy attention. With guys now routinely passing for 400 yards a game, 500 this week, the NFL has morphed into such a passing league that running backs are becoming less fantasy relevant with each passing week. This week, the trend continued as there were only 6 running backs in the top 50 in standard scoring, and only 1 in the top 10 at number 10, and that was Fred Jackson from Thursday night. Now, if you're getting offers for top quarterbacks or receivers for running backs, so long as you have serviceable replacements for what you're giving up, you have to make those trades. Hey, is Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen becoming fantasy relevant? He was a 3rd-round pick and nobody in my league had him. Keenan had 5 receptions for 80 yards in week 4, and last night he had 6 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown, good for 17 fantasy points. And Allen's big night could have even been better. He had 1 touchdown catch overturned when it was ruled that he didn't get his second foot down, and he was also the intended receiver on the Rivers pass that was picked off in the end zone late in the game. Allen was open, but Rivers threw it behind him. All told, he received 9 targets on the night, clearly vaulting him up the fantasy landscape. And this is why you need to tune in here every day. Check out this clip from last Thursday's show. It seems that so many of you are either hit with injuries or looking to replace disappointed performers, so I wanted to give you a few guys that you're likely to find on your waiver list in week 5. Jay Cutler is finally becoming comfortable with a wide receiver not named Brandon Marshall. 2 weeks ago, Alshon Jeffery was targeted 8 times, nabbing 7 of them, and last week he had 5 receptions for 107 yards and a touchdown. And with Marshall on the other side, he's going to see plenty of one-on-one coverage. And if you wait for another week for confirmation, it's going to be too late. He's going to be gone. Jeffery had 13 targets, 10 catches for 218 yards, and a TD good for 27 standard fantasy points Sunday, the most of any receiver this week. Hey, defenses can't double-team both Marshall and Jeffery, and now they'll have to pick their poison. Hopefully you already got him. People stuck with T.Y. Hilton after a rough 2 weeks were rewarded yesterday. I received so many emails before yesterday's games asking if he should be benched because he was up against the vaunted Seahawks defense. Look, don't get me wrong, Seattle's defense is good, but they're not the 85 Bears. After 5 weeks, Seattle ranks 6th in total yardage given up, making them in the top 20% of the league. But I certainly wouldn't be benching my good players just because they're facing Seattle's defense. Tony Romo continues to be the Trevor Hoffman of the NFL. Remember Trevor? A fantasy stud, a lock for 40 saves a year for the Padres, but never able to get anyone out in a big spot when it counted. It's no consolation to Cowboys fans, but Romo put up 40 of his 67 fantasy points on the year in yesterday's game. And outside of Peyton Manning's Week 1 performance, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a better fantasy day this year by a quarterback. And speaking of Peyton Manning, it may be time to consider trading him. Sure, he's averaging 377 yards a game and 4 touchdowns, but he threw his first interception of the season Sunday, and if he's going to throw a pick every time he throws 20 touchdown passes, he may end up with as many turnovers as his brother. And speaking of Eli, I was of the opinion that much of his inefficiency and all of his turnovers were a result of a poor Giants offensive line. But yesterday, that was on him. 3 more interceptions and 3 grounding penalties? Not good. From a fantasy perspective, you have to keep playing him though. He's actually attempted 5 more passes than his brother on the season, and if no other reason than osmosis, he's going to be a decent fantasy quarterback going forward. So the Vikings signed Josh Freeman to a $3 million one-year deal, and my inbox fills up with questions on whether I think they intend to make him their starter or not. He sucks, but he's going to be their starter. $3 million is more than what Christian Ponder and Matt Castle make combined. Look, I didn't like him as a fantasy quarterback in Tampa, and I don't like him anymore because he's moving north. Today's Twitter question comes from @EdE, who wants to know if he should keep playing Matt Schaub. Look, I tweeted last night, Schaub clearly has naked pictures of Gary Kubiak or something. Either that or they just think TJ Yates is totally inept. It's almost insulting to Yates to not put him in at this point. They actually have pretty good personnel surrounding Schaub in Houston, and he's a veteran, so it wouldn't shock me if he was able to turn things around. But right now, he's shell-shocked and like a deer in headlights. If you hadn't already been looking for an alternative before yesterday, your team probably has more holes in it than just your quarterback. Hey, if you're not following Roto Expert's Jennifer Millman on Twitter, you're doing yourself a disservice. She puts out a wealth of useful fantasy information every day. This morning, she points out that Jamal Charles and Matt Forte are the class of PPR running backs, both averaging 5.6 receptions per game. She also points out that Ray Rice and Bernard Pierce are both averaging the same yards per carry as Benjarvis Green-Ellis and Darrell Richardson, 2.9 yards per carry. As Jennifer says, yikes. If you have a fantasy question you want answered on the show, hit me up with a tweet. If I don't use your question, I'll tweet you back with my best advice. And be sure to tune in to the Roto Experts Fantasy Football News Notes and Analysis segment every weekday. I'll be here to keep you current and ahead of the competition, and on weekends come back for This Week in Fantasy Football as I team up with the King, Scott Engel, covering the week that was, the week that will be, and answering your viewer questions. For Roto Experts, I'm Mike Cardano. See you tomorrow. Enjoy the game tonight.